Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone just ran the 400-meter distance in 47.78 seconds and also completed the 400-meter hurdles in 50.37 seconds. That's the second fastest 400-meter in history and the fastest 400-meter hurdles ever run. So the question is simple. Is Sydney already the greatest one-lap athlete we've ever seen? To answer this question, we will work through each of our 5 athlete categories to ultimately score Sydney out of 10 and see where she lands on the ATHLT scoreboard. And don't forget to strike that subscribe button so we can keep scoring athletes. When it comes to running, speed really is everything. And we know Sydney holds the record for the fastest 400-meter hurdles, but what's crazy is that it's not just a one-off record. She owns a whopping 6 of the 10 fastest 400-meter hurdles times ever recorded, including the top 3. Not only does that prove her speed, but also her consistency and her sheer talent in that she is just so far ahead of her competitors. If we zoom in on her 50.37 second record from the Paris 2024 Olympics, it gets even more ridiculous. She is one of the only 2 women in history to ever go under 51 seconds in the 400 hurdles, and she didn't just sneak under it, she smashed it by 0.63 seconds. And here's the wild part. She's broken that 51-second barrier 2 more times, and every one of those was her previous world record. At this point, she's basically just racing herself. Most of the other 400 top hurdlers are more than a full second behind her. That's the kind of gap you expect at a high school meet, not in an Olympic final. To keep building on this, she is diverse. She has a legacy in the 400-meter hurdles, but also, as mentioned before, she races in the 400-meter flat, even though it's not her primary event. At the 2025 Tokyo World Championship, she ran a 47.78 second time to win the flat 400-meter. That's the second fastest time ever, behind only Marita Cox's controversial 47.6 from 1985. This is an extremely impressive dual event aptitude, but there is one caveat with her profile here. She's hyper-elite in a very specific lane, but some of the all-time greats have held major records across a wider spread of events. For example, Usain Bolt holds world records in the 100, 200, and 4x100 meter relay. And then you've also got Florence Griffith-Joyner, who still has the 100 and 200 world records on the women's side. There are a few more runners we can add here, but I won't go through the list. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that compared to that, Sydney's resume is narrower. But within that one-lap corridor from 400-meter hurdles to 400-meter flat, she's as close as we've ever seen to total technical perfection. She scores a 9 here. Running is probably the purest test of the human body's physical capabilities. No equipment, no tricks, just you, your legs, and how far you can push them. And in the 400-meter event, you need a combo of brutal explosive power and just enough endurance to hold that power for a full lap while your body is screaming at you to stop. Based off her record times, she's moving at roughly 8.2 meters per second for most of the lap. If you plug in her body weight and how often her feet end the ground, you end up with Sydney generating peak forces of about 4.5 times her own body weight on every single step for an entire lap. That level of power is above normal elite 400-meter territory, and it actually sits in the elite range for 100-meter sprinters. So basically, she is putting out almost a 100-meter sprint power level and stretching it over 400 meters. That's just insane. Building on this, we took a look at her VO2 max, which is a measure of how effectively your heart and lungs can supply oxygen to your muscles, with a higher VO2 max allowing your muscles to work harder for longer. Generally, sprinters have a low VO2 max value as they need explosive power more than endurance, and distance runners have a high VO2 max to assist them get through those long distances. Sydney's estimated VO2 max sits at around 60 milliliters per kilo per minute. That would give her a bigger aerobic base than most short-distance sprinters like Sha'Carri Richardson, while still sitting below elite endurance runners. In other words, she's almost carrying an endurance runner's VO2 max and using it at a sprint pace. Okay, so before we lock in Sydney's score, let's turn some of these stats into something you can actually feel. If we take her 400 hurdles world record and use the simple formula speed equals distance over time, her average speed across the race comes out at 7.94 meters per second. To put that into context, that's faster than Dalilah Muhammad's flat 400 meter pace, and Sydney is doing it over hurdles. At the end of the day, toughness isn't just about how fast you can go on your best day. It's also about how often you can turn up, race, and not fall apart. Some 400 meters like Femke Bol are out there all year, diamond leagues, indoor seasons, championships, and relays. Racing is basically their day job. Sydney's approach is a bit different though. She picks her spots, runs fewer meets, locks in for the trials, and then goes in for the big global finals, and then she vanishes again. That's where she falls back a little bit in this category. When you compare her race volume to the real grinders, especially those outside the 400-meter world who are racing constantly and still putting up world records, her durability doesn't quite hit that same level. And on top of that, she has had injuries, where she's had seasons wiped out by a hamstring issue, and she's missed a world championship with a knee problem. So on peak speed, raw power, and race day endurance, Sydney is a 10 out of 10. But in that grinded out year after year toughness test, she's not fully maxed out yet. So for now, it's still an impressive 8.5 out of 10. The psychology of running is interesting. One of the wild things about sprinting is just how short your moment actually is. You train for years, you grind through cycles of preparation, all for a race that's over in well under a minute. And in a final, you basically get one shot, a tiny window to execute perfectly. So when you step onto the track at a World Championships or an Olympics, the pressure isn't just high, it's suffocating. And under that kind of pressure, Sydney has been almost flawless. If you look at her individual finals in the 400 meter hurdles and 400 flat, she has a 100% podium rate, and of that, 80% are gold medal wins. But if you zoom out and look at pure medal volume across all events, she's still got some catching up to do. There are numerous runners here that have clocked more medals than her. Those are the athletes who have shown insane headspace, not just once or twice, but over and over again. Another big piece of Sydney's headspace shows up in the relays. Relay legs are pure pressure. You don't control the start, you often get the baton behind, and you've got one lap to either hold on or drag your team back into the race. In the 4x400 relay, Sydney has dropped multiple sub-48 second splits for the US squad, with a particular standout session in the Paris 24 Olympics where she split an insane 47.71 seconds. That's one of the fastest relay splits we've ever seen. For a 26-year-old, her headspace is clearly elite. She shows up when it matters, and if anything, she almost looks more relaxed and dangerous the bigger the stage gets. However, she hasn't put herself in as many high-pressure situations as some of the medal hoarders we've talked about, which means there's still room for her to prove just how deep that competitive edge really goes. So for now, for headspace, she gets an 8.5. Sydney turned pro in 2018. Never since then, it's been a straight rise from teenage prodigy to pretty much the undisputed queen of the one-lap world. If you look at her 400-meter hurdles progression on a year-by-year basis, it tells her story perfectly. She's gone from running 55 low as a 14-year-old to 50 high in her mid-20s with basically no backward steps except for an injury hit in 2023. This graph is almost unnatural. The times keep getting faster and she's still got years left in her prime. So when you project that forward, it honestly is a little scary with what she might still do. To really show how strong Sydney has been over time, we can look at how many seasons she's been in that top tier, which is either in the world top 3 or holding world leading times. So pretty much from the year she turned pro all the way through to now, she's been a genuine top 3 threat every single season she's been healthy. Again, she still has some catching up to do to the all-time grinders, but she's already starting to match the classic 400-meter greats in terms of how long they've stayed at their peak, and she's doing that even before hitting her late 20s. The only thing really holding her back in this category right now is time. Her story just isn't finished. She hasn't had that 12 to 15 year arc in the sport like other runners have, and that's before you even compare her to legends in other disciplines who've been elite forever. It's looking more and more likely that she'll eventually pass a lot of those names, but she still has to do it. So for now, she scores a 7. Finally, it's time to take a look at her resume. So far, Sydney has 9 gold medals, the 400-meter hurdles world record, and also the American 400-meter record, and her number 1 in the 400 hurdles is by a huge margin. There is no other athlete in the 400-meter history that has this combination of status. Sydney is already sitting in the very top tier for medals in the 400-meter lane, and that's with at least one more Olympic cycle still ahead of her. So if you stay in the lane, Sydney looks untouchable. But the moment you compare her resume to the medal factories in the other events such as Allyson Felix or Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce, her numbers don't look quite as scary. At the end of the day, she's not a 20 or 30 medal athlete, but given her records, if she keeps going like this, she might just be the first 400-meter racer in history to reach these levels. She is a hyper-efficient specialist with a small but insanely high-quality stack of wins. So this number might seem low, but the triumphs category is one that has an unbelievable level of competition. So for now, she scores a 7. Sydney is one of the most interesting athletes we've looked at. She's already elite in aptitude, toughness, and headspace, and the only reason she doesn't completely own longevity and triumphs is simple. She just hasn't had enough time yet to keep stacking seasons and medals. So is Sydney already the greatest one-lap athlete we've ever seen? Honestly, yeah, I think she is. Her numbers are ridiculous. You can argue she doesn't race as often as some of the other 400-meter runners, but when she does line up, she's just better than them. She is definitely risk-averse though, and I do hope to see her in more running events in the future. But as of right now, Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone sits firmly in that generational outlier category. She still has work to do to match the career volume and range of the broader all-time greats, but she also has time. So with all scores considered, she scores an 8 for now. Hopefully we can look into her career again in a couple of seasons to see if she has truly solidified her elite status. Anyways, if you're a fan of other running legends or just American sporting legends, we have made a video on Sha'Carri Richardson and other iconic athletes, which should pop up on the screen now. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to sprint towards that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell notification so we can keep scoring athletes. I'm also interested to hear your thoughts, so be sure to leave some comments as well. Anyways, thanks for watching, team. Catch you at the next one.